Hello everyone and welcome to a new tutorial in the Python Intermediate series. In this tutorial, we are going to look at decorators. So decorators allow you to modify the behavior of a function. In the first tutorial of the series, which was class methods and static methods, we did use decorators. But in this tutorial, let's see how we can create our own decorators. So let's get started and look at some examples. So let's say we have a function to divide two numbers and let's call the function div, and the function takes two parameters and we'll just return the division. So x divided by y. So let's go ahead and call our function. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. So let's run this. And as you can see, we get 2 as the output. Now in division, when you divide a smaller number with a bigger number, the answer is always in 0 point something. So instead of 10 and 5, if we pass 5 and 10, the answer will be in 0 point something. So let's change the parameter and run the code. And as you can see, we get the answer in 0.5. So now let's say for some reason we don't want the answer in 0, and so if the first parameter is less than the second parameter, we are going to swap the parameters. And to do that, inside the function we can check for the parameters. So if x is less than y, we want to swap the values. So this is how we can swap values in Python. Now after we swap the values, let's go ahead and print the values. So let's say print swap, and let's also print the values. So x and y. So now when the first parameter is less than the second parameter, it will swap the values and the answer should be 2.0. So let's run this and see if it works. And sure enough, it swaps the values and we get the answer in 2.0. So this works. But now let's say we have another function to subtract values. So let's create that function. And this function also takes two parameters. So x and y. And let's return the subtraction. So x minus y. Now in this function, we know that when we subtract a bigger number from a smaller number, we get the answer in negative. So 5 minus 10 is equal to minus 5. And let's say we don't want that. So similar to the first function, we can swap the values. But instead of writing the same code in the sub function, we can create and use a decorator. But before we create a decorator, let's see what happens when we print a function without the round brackets. So let's say print, and let's print the function sub without the round brackets, and let's run this. And you can see when we run the function without the round brackets, we get the location of the function. So this is the function name and this is the location of the function. And we can use this location to create new names for the function. So to create a new name for the function, what we can do is create a new variable. So let's say the variable name is new equal to, and then the function name without the round brackets. And now we can use the new variable to call the sub function. So now let's print the new variable. And let's also use this variable to call the sub function. And we can pass two values. So let's say 5 and 10. And let's run this. And as you can see, the new variable has the location of the sub function, and we also get 5 minus 10, which is minus 5. So we were able to access the sub function with a new name, and we are going to use the same concept when creating a decorator. So now let's go ahead and create a decorator. And to create a decorator, the first thing we want is a new function. And let's say the function name is swap. And the swap function takes one parameter. And this parameter is a function. And inside the swap function, we'll create another function. And let's call the function wrapper. So you can name the function anything you want, it doesn't matter. And the wrapper function takes two parameters. And inside the wrapper function, we can just use the swap logic. So I will just complete the remaining function and then explain it in a bit. So now that the function is complete, let's call our function and I will explain the working as we go. So let's call our swap function. And the swap function takes one parameter, which is a function. So we are going to pass the div function without the round brackets. So we are passing the location of the div function. So now the func parameter is equal to div, which is a function. So let's create a comment so it will be easier to remember. Now inside the swap function, we have a wrapper function, but we are not calling the function anywhere, so it will not run. So the swap function will only return the location of the wrapper function, which we are storing inside a new variable. So let's create a comment to remember it. So new equals wrapper. So now we can use the new variable to call the wrapper function. And the wrapper function takes two parameters. So let's pass 5 and 10. And then inside the function, we are checking if x is less than y. And if it is true, we are swapping the values. And then we are also printing the swapped values. And after that, we are calling this function, which is func. But we already know that func is equal to the div function. So we are indirectly calling the div function and passing the swapped values x and y. And the div function returns the division, which is then stored inside x. And then we are returning x, which is stored inside the answer variable. So now let's go ahead and print the answer variable and see what it prints. So let's run this. And we get a name error. So let's see why we got this error. So the reason we got the error is because we are accessing the location of the div function before creating the function. So let's cut this and paste it before we access the location of the function. So let's run this again. And as you can see, we swap the values and we get the result in 2.0. So let's remove the print statement and let's swap the values to 10 and 5. And let's run this. And as you can see, it works, we get the result. Now instead of writing these two lines, we can use the @ symbol before the function and the function name. So swap. And let's clean this up and call the div function. And let's pass 5 and 10. So it should swap the values and return the result. And sure enough, it works. We swap the values and we also get the result. So instead of writing 2 or 3 lines of code, we can use the add symbol and the function name, and Python will do all of that automatically. So let's try the same with the sub function. And now let's call our function. And let's pass 2 and 10. So it should swap the values and do 10 minus 2, which is 8. So let's run this. And as you can see, it swaps the values and prints the subtraction. So this is how we can create our own decorators and use them. One thing to remember when creating decorators is that the number of parameters in the function and the wrapper function should be the same. So if we have extra parameters in the wrapper function, this will cause an error. So let's run this. And as you can see, we get an error saying missing one required positional argument. So the number of parameters should be the same between the decorated function and the wrapper function. So now let's clean this up and let's look at another example. So for this example, let's create a decorator to measure the time required by a function to execute. So let's create a function timer, and this will be the name of our decorator. And as we know, this function takes a function as a parameter, so func. And inside the timer function, we'll create a wrapper function. And let's say the function takes one parameter, so let's say x. And now inside the function, we need to start the timer. So let's create a start variable equals to time dot time. So we are using the time module to get the starting time, and we also need to import the time module. So now we have the start time. So let's call the function and let's pass x. And now to calculate the end time, let's create a new variable. So let's say end equals start. So the starting time minus the current time, so time dot time. So now let's go ahead and print the end time. By function, and let's print the end variable. So for the wrapper function, if we don't want to return anything, we can do that. But for the timer function, we need to return the location of the wrapper function. So let's do that. So return and then the location of wrapper function. So now let's use the decorator and see if it works. And let's create a function. So let's say temp. And inside the function, let's print the parameter. So now let's call the function and see if it works. And let's pass 10. So we get the time in negative. So let's fix that. So we need to subtract start from the current time. And let's also remove the print statement. And let's run the code. And now as you can see, it prints the parameter and it also prints the time required by the function. And now let's pause the temp function for 2 seconds. And to pause the function, we can use the time module. So time.sleep. And we want to pause the function for 2 seconds. So let's pass 2 and let's run this. And you can see it prints the parameter and then waits for 2 seconds. And then it prints the time required by the function, which in this case is 2 seconds. So this means that our decorator is working. So this is how we can create our own decorators and use them. And as we saw, decorators can be really useful. So that concludes the tutorial. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you learned something. And see you guys until next time.